Hi, my name is Charles Plaisir. I'm a graduate student and a wildlife researcher from Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec. I'm studying a population of eastern grey kangaroos in the Wilson's Promontory National Park in Australia. My research focuses mainly on understanding how young kangaroos' survival and growth are affected by the environment surrounding them. Australia is known to have a very variable climate, with floods and drought occurring quite frequently in some places. Despite this extremely inhospitable environment, millions of kangaroos thrive across the landscape as they've adapted to this uncertainty. But their success does not really depend on luck, but rather on a number of adaptations that give them the ability to thrive in their natural environment. Kangaroos are marsupials, a group of terrestrial mammals whose early growth occurs in the pouch. Before moving to the pouch, they go through gestation, but only for 36 days. From a birth as highly undeveloped young, mothers will keep their joey inside a pouch, in which it will be spending 7 to 8 months before exiting for the first time. Not much more than 3 months later, it will have to permanently vacate the pouch. Until then, while feeding off maternal milk and growing quickly, the joey will be growing in size and increase its fat reserves before it must directly face the unpredictable climate typical of Australia. As a research group, my lab focuses on population-level changes, currently looking at a population of about 200 individuals that has been monitored since 2008. We are interested in this Australian species for its resemblance to the ungulates we find in North America. Since the kangaroo is quite analogous to the deer species we have up here, they can give us quality insight on our own large mammals, as they're going to face increasingly harsh environmental conditions with climate change being underway. We are specifically interested in female reproductive success, juvenile and adult survival, as well as growth patterns, and how these three aspects can be affected by the environment. To answer such questions, we need to take many things into account, like daily rainfall and temperature values, as well as frequent vegetation and population density surveys, allowing us to monitor small changes in the population through time. And for having looked at it in the past 12 years, it's clear that there's a lot of variation in the environment. But how is it exactly that kangaroos thrive in such an unpredictable environment? Kangaroos, being large mammals, are characterized as long-lived age-repair species, which means they can live for over a decade and have multiple reproduction events throughout their life. In order to optimize the number of joeys they produce, females use a conservative reproductive strategy. This means they will prioritize their condition and their survival over the survival of their joey when conditions are bad. In years of heavy rainfall or drought, very few survive and even less actually make it to adulthood. While this can be a cruel method, this strategy proves to be efficient for populations to maintain their numbers without being too negatively affected by harsh conditions. Although this strategy can be efficient on the long term, one must be wondering how bad this actually is to juveniles, knowing they've been exposed to very harsh conditions early on in their life. For kangaroos, from the moment the joey is born, the mother can regulate the amount of milk she produces, its energy content, and the frequency at which she will nurse her young, giving her more latitude to match her effort with the amount of resources she can get from the environment. When there are just not enough resources, the mother can even completely abandon her young, leaving it for dead. When using biological terms, we often say that the mother's conservative strategy will transfer the cost of reproduction to their young. That means it's even more difficult for a joey to make it to a certain age compared to other eutherian species whose early growth occurs in their mother's belly. In other words, the joey depends largely on the environment, and a question I really wanted to answer for my project was, how are joeys exactly affected by the environment in the Wilson's Promontory National Park? This question might seem straightforward at first, but how does one exactly answer the latter? I first needed to actually make it to Australia to have a better idea how to answer my question. While not being mandatory, it's always easier to build robust hypotheses when you know what your species looks like and how it would behave in its natural environment. While being on the field, we have to perform as many captures of males, females, and young joeys as possible. This is what we will be using to answer questions in our lab. We also spend a big chunk of our day taking location and behavioral observations for other questions we are trying to answer. This process has been on for more than a decade, which means we have collected a lot of data since the beginning of the study and answered so many questions already. To answer my question, I needed to have a certain number of joeys. Only 5 joeys would definitely not be enough to know what affects their survival. Some years, all of them die, and in others, most of them actually live. I therefore needed many of them, from many years with many different environmental conditions. In other words, I needed a large sample size to answer my question. With the kangaroo study being over 12 years old, and over 700 joeys having been captured since 2008, I knew I had more than enough. Now, in ecology, many things must be taken into account. In my case, I need to know how much grass is available at a given time and what affects it. From previous studies, I knew temperature and rainfall were 2 important factors to look into when trying to understand grass availability, but there's something else you must not forget. However high the amount of grass may be, it is important to also calculate the number of kangaroos present at a given time. Having 3 parcels of grass for 3 kangaroos is not the same as having 3 parcels for 300 kangaroos. Population density was therefore another key aspect to keep in mind as I was answering my question. So what do we have now? Vegetation growth, temperature, rainfall, and population density. That's a good start, and that's when the fun begins. As an ecologist, I'm looking for nature's stories. What can the sum of nature's parts tell me about the young joeys trying to make it to adulthood? For that, we often need to use statistical tools, different computational methods that can turn the numbers we collect from the field into actual stories we can then write up and share with the world. While this sometimes is the least exciting part of our work, it most often is a cornerstone to good science. Being able to understand what raw data collected on the field can tell us once we look at it from the right angle is probably one of the most valuable things we can get from a science degree. This allows me to tell you today, not without a doubt, but certainly with a pretty high level of confidence, that juvenile kangaroo survival is highly variable. It actually varies a lot from one year to the next for reasons we have yet to discover. But there is still an important effect of the amount of vegetation present. This tells us that, with an increasingly unpredictable environment, young kangaroos in southern Australia will have to hope for high vegetation to make it up to adulthood. And the best way to predict the amount of food each kangaroo will have is to keep in mind what affects this exact thing. And that is the population density, rainfall, and temperature they will be exposed to in their life. This population of kangaroos, and countless others across the country, designed their own methods to live in a climate famous for its random disturbances. While being adapted to their current environment at this time, things might slightly shift with ongoing climate change. Even though they are not a species at risk, kangaroos come in contact quite often with humans. It is therefore very important to understand what causes changes in their numbers to adapt regulation practices to their current state. Finally, by answering my research question, I realized how much we still don't know about the population dynamics of kangaroos. There is still so much to discover, and that means we still need many more young ecologists to roll up their sleeves, lace up their boots, and go on the field with us to give us a hand in the future.